Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dreamscript and this is the Rough Cut Diamond Mines, the place I go to find the rough ideas that we can then turn into something a little more polished. It's the end of the first week of our Cursed Relics art challenge, and like I mentioned last time, this is the point in the challenge where we're starting to hit a bit of a wall when it comes to this. The creative juices were starting to run a little bit dry, so as we continue through this, there are gonna be points where we're in an on and off struggle to get through. But for now, we're moving on. This is not one of the problem prompts. Day 7 is going to be a cape. And I don't know about you, but my first thought when it came to a cursed cape was a more aggressive version of Doctor Strange's Cape of Flight. Like a cape that would potentially bite off anyone's head if they tried to wear it. Maybe just nibble on anybody it liked, kind of like a mimic. I'm not going to be doing that, but I did want to share that very silly mental image with everyone else before we continued. Do with that what you will. Seriously though, a cursed cape has so much potential. You could basically flip to any magical cape or cloak in a D&D artifacts book, dial the magical effect up to 11, move something slightly to the left, and boom, you have a cursed cape. The fun thing about curses is simply figuring out just how far a good intention went horribly wrong. Because that's how all really good horror begins. After all, the road to hell is paved with 1,000 good intentions. All of that in mind, I feel like this one has to be one of the artifacts that doesn't look cursed at all. Not like the comb, because that still had an element of the macabre with a skull in it, but there's no way anyone would ever guess this item is cursed until it's far too late. Because, for the design, I decided I needed to use the prettiest sticker I have for this one, and it's this stunning Luna Moth sticker. I can actually tell you where I got this. It's from a store called Earthbound, so it's a place at one of my local malls if anyone wants one. I have been trying to find links to all the previous stickers and put them in my descriptions of the previous videos, but since a lot of these came from a huge pack I got online, it's been a little tricky to find some of the individual ones. Like, obviously some of them do have it, but there have been a couple that I have not been able to find a singular selling point for. But never mind all that. All I need is the curse intensity for now. Over to the wheel and spin. And it's deadly slow. Oh. Oh! 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 Hey, random fun fact about insects. Did you know that when some moths transition from larvae to their fluffy flying form, they actually lose their mouths and thus any means of eating? So as soon as they're out flying around, desperately trying to procreate and continue their genetic legacy, they are also starving slowly to death the entire time. And that among the moths that do that, the Luna moth is one of them? That's right, people, it's about time for some body horror! Let's go! Get to the time lapse, we're making a messed up cursed artifact! So, my plan for this picture originally was to be kind of mid-transformation of the mouth closing over for the user. Again, this would be another one where animation would be so effective. Like, I remember seeing a horror movie trailer a couple years back that included a quick flash of someone's mouth being closed over, either it was with their own skin or maybe it was just with stitches. It was one of those two, and for some reason that quick visual was the only truly spooky thing in that trailer, as it was the only thing that stuck with me as particularly disturbing. I don't even remember what movie that trailer was for at this point, but I do remember the image. But then I also had the idea that did make it into the original sketch that was on Instagram of the hood closing over the face and kind of fusing together until the wearer passed. That was an interesting design, potentially for an intentional cursed item. But like I mentioned earlier, this was one of the ones I didn't want the curse to be intentional on. More of a side effect of something that didn't really get fully tested before being put into practical use. So, as you can see, the effect I ended up going for is kind of something in the middle. Like, it's an effect that needs to have some time to kick in or something careless to trigger it. Possibly like forgetting to take it off after a certain amount of time, or something else easy to forget in the heat of a bunch of much more important stuff. I also decided to up some of the body horror element that I wanted, in addition to the mouth part, that because of how I'm exploring the idea for why the curse is the way it is, basically being a very poorly applied partial polymorph spell, like someone was wanting to recreate the way a druid's wild shape ability worked in a cape. That was the idea that made the most amount of sense for why somebody would want to be making something like this in the first place and why it ended up going so horribly wrong. I decided to add the idea of more limbs being added to the transformation, since obviously insects have a lot of limbs, and if you're trying to recreate something somebody does without fully understanding how and why they do it, you're probably going to end up doing something similar to this in making a horrible, what's the word I want? A horrible misunderstanding of the effect and thus terrible consequences from it. I do also want to make a note that if anybody is ever interested in getting the full details of these cursed items to put them in their own role-playing games, potentially, I would be so honored. You don't even need to ask. I mean, I work hard on these videos, and it would be amazing to know if somebody was able to inflict these artifacts on their players. All in good fun, of course. If you do end up doing that, just tag me, please, and thank you. For the coloring process on this one, I pulled straight from the sticker, color drop and all. The colors are the most appealing thing of a Luna moth in general, so they were obviously going to be used. But I think that should cover just about everything here. So let's actually get into the story of how this cape claimed its previous victim. Enjoy!
They had found the cape among the treasures hoarded by a former draconic foe. An absolutely stunning hooded cape in the shape of a set of what looked like some kind of insect wings. The beauty of the item made it fit right in with all the gold and jewels, and when they realized there was some kind of magic woven into the cape, it was immediately added to their bag of holding, and it stayed there for a little while. Long enough for them to almost forget they had it until someone decided to sort through the bag, rediscover it, and start messing with it. Their druid and ranger were especially drawn to the cape and the natural inspiration of it all. That thrill of magic they felt in the fabric, combined with the style of wings, it was almost as if the cape was promising them the potential of flight. And to fly without the use of a spell or concentration, that could only be useful to their journey. They had to test it. Somehow. Previous close call encounters had taught them to be wary of magical items they discovered in monster caverns, and they did not wish to repeat those mistakes. So they decided to get the item thoroughly examined the next time they made it to a city they knew powerful mages were. Yes, that meant they had to wait, but it was better than rushing into this thing. And when they were finally able to present it to a gathering of mages for examination, it stirred up quite a bit of interest. They started hearing about the mage that everyone seemed to link with the cape, a mage that had a fascination with the natural world, one that had been a talented tracker in the wild before he had learned to wield mystical forces and started creating many incredible magical items, some of which were still commonly known, actually. He had apparently disappeared towards the end of his life, and where the group found this apparently undocumented artifact of his, it didn't take much to guess what his fate might have been. And the cape was indeed identified to be a variation of a cape of flight, already a rare find, but that it was one that granted the ability through transformation, rather than a simple spell woven through the material. Said transformation would also create new limbs that could be used for somatic spell casting and empower the user with great strength and endurance. Though the mage that examined the cape did warn them there was an oddness to the way the magic in the cape seemed to work, That transformation would happen faster each time the flight element was used as the cape became more familiar with the user. And while that in and of itself was slightly concerning, he did also say it could be easily kept in check by having the cape taken off and tucked away whenever they rested in the evenings. Simple enough. And so, the group carried on, delighted with the news of their new artifact's abilities. The first time they tried to actively use the cape, however, was disturbing, to say the least. The way the transformation process occurred reminded their druid of the way their wild shape worked, in that the magic took their original body and then manipulated the flesh to become the correct, necessary shapes. Naturally, it was all painless, but the sounds. Oh, the sounds. The way their bones crunched and creaked as they were shifted, the stretching as skin was pulled tight and peeled as fur started to emerge from beneath, the pulsing of their blood in their ears as their eyes widened into unnatural insect ones. The end of the transformation was not a full insect, but something in between that and a humanoid. It was honestly enough for many of the group to swear off the cape almost immediately after their first use. None of them could argue the usefulness of it and its effects, but it was clearly not a comfortable thing to use. And then they came to understand the true depths of the cape's magical oddities when one of them accidentally fell asleep while wrapped in the cape. In fairness, they hadn't meant to. They had all been going through an exceptionally taxing time. They were in the middle of a quest to try and stop a lich from opening a gate to the underworld and summoning easily the largest army of the undead the world has ever seen. One of the lich's generals had just kidnapped one of their numbers, and they had just that day survived an attack from a swarm of risen orc corpses. All while they were trying to come to terms with the fact that somebody they thought was a trusted friend had actually betrayed them to these enemies. So remembering that their cape had a potential quirk if they didn't take it off at night was not on the highest priority. They were awoken by the pain screams of their companion as the magic that usually was only triggered when they used the cape started swirling out of control around them. The transformation they were used to was happening, but this time it seemed to actually hurt as their body was distorted into that exaggerated insect humanoid form. As that magic seemed to grow more and more intense, the screaming started to muffle, but not because it didn't hurt anymore. Oh no. As the group watched, the bottom of their stomachs sunk to the bottom of the abyss as they see the magic of the cape sealing their companion's mouth shut with their own skin. The panic that arose was palpable. Despite all their attempts to help, spells, strength, everything, no one could reverse the effects of the cape's magic, much less pull the cape itself off their companion now. In fact, the cape seemed to feel more fragile, as if the material had become actual insect wings, and each pull seemed only to hurt their friend further. What could they do? They couldn't abandon their quest now. They couldn't abandon their kidnapped friend and return to the city for assistance with this. Too many things were happening right now for distractions, even though this felt a great deal more important than a mere distraction. After much arguing and trying to come up with a solution, eventually, at the insistence of the companion themselves, they forced themselves to carry on with their quest. They could do nothing but watch as their companion started to grow thinner and thinner, almost gaunt, growing weaker and weaker, day after day. And add to all that the increasingly intense battles they were facing, and the damages were adding up towards the end. They weren't sure just how much desperation was driving their companion to finally stop the world from ending just so they could have a moment to save their own life. All in vain. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching this far into the video. Can you tell I had a good time with this one? Hopefully that will continue in upcoming speed draws, and you can share my glee as we carry on with this art challenge. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, sweet dreams, and here's to all the little things that bring out the magic in you.